Good morning, everyone. We are equally excited and terrified of being here. This is our first time speaking at RSA. So I'm Nicolas. We both work for Zimperium, which is a security vendor, a mobile security vendor. And today we're going to talk about the rise and transformation of mobile malware. Yeah? So Gianluca here is the team leader of the malware team that we have. Basically, it's focusing on malware detection. Yeah. And mandatory disclaimer, I know all of you are speed readers, so I will skip this. And this is the outline of today's presentation. So first, we're going to talk, we're going to make a very high level overview of the differences between mobile and desktop malware, and you will say, oh, mobile malware is not really a big thing then. And then we'll talk about why mobile, and then you will be scared, say, oh, no, mobile malware is a big thing. Then we'll go through two case studies. The first one is Joker. This is a consumer threat. The reason why we chose these two case studies is because they are quite different. The first one is targeting consumers, and it's been around for a very long time, so it's useful to see the evolution of mobile malware. And the second case is bunker Trojans. It's more like a generic type of attack that is represented in many, many different families. And it's, even when the end user is the victim, it's actually a very corporate-oriented risk, or should be relevant for corporations. Then we'll do a bit of science fiction, talking about what's next, or what are the current trends that we are seeing, and how we think that they're going to evolve. And last, what is there for you? So what should you do? So mobile versus desktop. We're going to focus in 3 steps: execution environment, malware spread, and then we'll compare two very common type of malware on desktop and how they can be used on mobile. Execution environment. So we're focusing here. I said it was very high level. So mainly three things. So resources. If you're running on a desktop, you have a lot of resources to use. If you're on mobile, that's not really the case. You have slower CPUs, you have less memory, and you have less storage to do stuff. The file system, usually mobile devices or mobile OSs are very hardened in access, so you cannot, you are very restricted on what you can see. That's not the case for desktop systems. Usually, for example, in Windows, most users are like admin users, so that's how it's being used mainly. While on mobile, you only see your data, and you can even see what other applications are doing or other locations. And last, the sandbox. So mobile OSs are heavily sandboxed. In order to actually do anything malicious, you need to, in most cases, escape that sandbox. And on desktop, even when sandbox is present, it's not very prevalent. So there are only a couple of applications. So spread. Now on desktop, it's very common to have horizontal spread. Like for example, ransomware is a very typical case in which one device on the network is infected and then it's propagated horizontally through the network. That is not something that doesn't happen on mobile directly. Removable media. So yesterday we had to update our slides and we brought a USB stick that was running an exploit too. So now we own all your data. No, that's just kidding. But that can be done. So it's an attack surface that is presented on desktop and is not available in mobile. And then attachments. So it's very common to have as an entry point of infection email attachments. On mobile, that's a bit different. The infection has to be more like one-to-one. So you need to trick the user to, if it's a case of malware, to install an application through, for example, apps that are on third-party store, or to sideload an app, or redirecting the user to a malicious website from which you trick them to download the app. And so it is a bit more complex. And again, it's one-to-one. You know, if I infect one mobile device, that doesn't guarantee that I will infect another mobile device that is on the same network. Messaging apps, it's also an entry point. We are using mobile devices constantly, so most of our communications nowadays are going through mobile devices, so that's why it's a very used in order to spread stuff. Again, entry point, I will redirect you to install something. And social engineering, again, same thing. We are constantly on our mobile devices, so it's pretty common that we're starting seeing that Email phishing are still there, but smishing is growing and growing and growing. So mobile devices are being targeted more. Just to give you some examples, there are two different types of malware, ransomware and crypto miners. On a desktop computer, basically that's pretty bad. You have full disk encryption, and the only way to recover that would be to have the encryption key or to pay the attacker to basically recover your data. On a mobile device, I said before that the data access is very limited, so you can only encrypt portions of the disk, or you can perform a different type of ransomware, which is basically to lock the user out of the device. I just changed the PIN code or the pattern that is used to log in, and that's how ransomware works on mobile. But since we have most of our data on the cloud nowadays, the impact of ransomware is not that bad. Crypto miners, something that we also is quite common on desktop. You can embed that anywhere, and you can do it also because, well, as we said before, you have more resources. So someone that is running a crypto miner maybe don't notice that. My dad wouldn't notice for sure. But on a mobile device, if you're running a crypto miner, your battery will be drained in no time. Your phone will be pretty warm. So it's kind of easy to identify. So it's not that bad, right? So then why are attackers targeting mobile? So the first and easy question is because it's there, right? So it has to be targeted. But on top of that, there are other reasons. So and we're going to talk about this, like mobile as a tracker, how you can also access the corporate data on a mobile device. We're going to talk about this newish trend, which is bring your own device. And we'll talk about what's the security awareness of the users nowadays, and some new attacks that can only happen on mobile. So mobile as a tracker, we are basically walking around with something that is telling our location all the time, that is able to record our conversations if I have access to it. It also can get up a picture of whatever we're seeing. Most cases it will be just our pocket, but still can do it. And then most of our communications are going through a mobile device. So if I have access to a mobile device, I can know a lot about a person. And this is actually something that we are seeing. Probably the names that we see on the right, which is Pegasus, Predator, Operation Triangulation, and Quadreams, are things that you know about. And these are like really high-profile spywares that are used to target high-level individuals. So, for example, journalists, human rights activists, even politicians. So that's a really, really bad thing that can happen, and only happens because it's a mobile device. And on top of that these are like the main spywares. We detected only this first half of the year 3,000 unique spyware samples. So it's not only a nation-state sponsored attack, but most applications, most malicious applications nowadays have also some sort of spyware capability. At the same time, mobile devices can access corporate data. Most of us have our email, work email on our phone. And if I'm exploiting the weakest link and I can get through that, I will do it. So in most cases, the mobile user is the one that is not very tech savvy, and you don't have all of the security measures that you have on a corporate infrastructure. So attackers will target that. And at the same time, mobile devices can be used to pivot to desktop. So we won't get into details here, but we are seeing some attacks that are being used that start from a mobile device and they pivot to a corporate network. BYOD, this is something that basically started around the pandemic. And the reason why this started is because there are many reports about an increased productivity by this. But bring your own device basically means we are not going to give you a corporate device, but we're going to enroll you in our network. The problem with that is that reduces the control over the environments. So if my employer, which is sitting somewhere over there, tells me I'm going to install this profile to exfiltrate all your data, or that can do many things, I would say no thanks. So you need to be compliant with many regulations, or you cannot exfiltrate a lot of data. So basically, bring your own device means you have some visibility, but not a lot of what's going on the device. And again, user behavior is the main risk factor. So if you combine a user that is not tech savvy with an environment that has very little control, and that has access to corporate data, then you have a problem. Just to give you an idea, nowadays, some report says that 85% of organizations are implementing BYOD. The next step is the security awareness. So in the 90s, if people were running a desktop environment without an antivirus, we would say, okay, it's fine. Nowadays, that would be like insane. So nowadays, 85% of desktop endpoints have some sort of protection. And here we have just a couple of logos. I know there are many more. I left them out on purpose, so you can say, hey, this dude forgot these many big names. But let's run the same exercise on mobile. How many logos do you think are missing there? So probably you can think about 1, 2, 3, but not more than that. So nowadays, 25% of mobile devices have some sort of endpoint protection, only 25. So basically, we are in the 90s for mobile devices. It's just about awareness. So people don't know that they need security yet. Last, increased attack surface. So there are some sort of attacks that can only happen on mobile devices. So what I'm showing here is real data, things that we are calling threat chains. And let's start by the right, because that's how we read, right? So imagine that I want to target any company. I don't need to get into that company. What I can do is I can go and sit on the cafe that is on the corner and wait. I can create a malicious Wi-Fi, or I can attack that Wi-Fi somehow. And whenever one of these employees of this corporation is connecting to the network, I can perform an attack like the one shown in the right. Basically, what we see here is an user connecting to an unsecure network. A couple of seconds later, there is a malicious website detection, so that's something that we detect as a redirection to a site that shouldn't have happened. 1 minute later, we have that the encryption is dropped. A minute later, we have that a malicious website was actually visited and opened. And then we end up with a malicious APK. So basically, that's our internal name to say Android malware. So that is a real attack, something that we detected. Let me show you a different attack chain, which is the one that is on the left, which is we start from a malicious, from an Android malware. And basically, a couple of seconds later, we have what we call a system tampering, which basically translates to a full device compromise. And the last step is SLinux disable, which is a hardening that Android has. So if we change these two attacks, we can end up from an employee that is going to the coffee shop on the corner with a device that is fully compromised and with very little steps required by the employee. So now it's a bit more scary. So let's now focus on the case studies.
Okay, so we decided today to show you these 2 case studies. The first one is Joker. It's a malware that, as Nico said before, is mostly targeting the end user and has been discovered a very long time ago. The malware is targeting Android devices and is evolving from 2017. So, there are a lot of years that this malware is still has been discovered and is still active, really a lot. Is impacting the user to global level and has 3 main features. It's a spyware, it's a click fraud, so it's trying to click without saying anything showing anything to the user on advertisement. And it's a fleeceware. Fleeceware is a malware that is subscribing the user to premium services without that he knows anything. So this is the usual attack chain of this specific malware. There is an entry phase where essentially the user is kind of forced to install the application because it's acting like a legit application. So this sample can be put on a website or a third-party store, on a whatever store they want to put this stuff. And at the beginning, it's a legit application, a game or a production application, whatever. After the user installed the application, it starts the reporting phase. So it sends a message to the command and control server saying, I'm here, I'm ready to attack. After this period is just waiting for a configuration from the attacker. The attacker decides to execute, start with the next phase, that is the execution phase, and is going essentially to get a payload, so a DEX that is encrypted, and the malware is decrypting the DEX in memory and executing it. This is called usually dropper. So there is a sample application that is legit, is dropping something, is getting the real malware, the real malicious phase, and is executing it. Finally, there is the attack phase. So the malware is exfiltrating SMS, contacts, whatever he wants to get from the device that he infected, and is starting to make money with it. So subscribing the user to the premium services and click fraud. The evolution of this malware started from, as I said, 2017, and at the beginning it was just inserting the SMS fraud and this acting like a fleeceware. After some years, a couple of years, they decided to add the spyware capabilities. So they are exfiltrating information from the device, contacts and SMS, whatever that they could probably use in the next few days or to performing other attacks. In the 2020, since this malware has started to be detected from the industry, they had to change something, and they have to increase the obfuscation. So they started to increase the obfuscation level to make the malware more difficult to be detected. And this is happened also the year before. So we find that in the 2021, there are new sophisticated version of this malware that were essentially inserting the multiple stages phase. So the dropper downloading, as I said before, the payload, and maybe they also added other stages. So the payload is downloading another payload and downloading another payload. That's because it's really difficult on Android side to keep control of all this chain. And so a lot of modules, they were starting to distribute a single module with a different payload. And finally, they started in 2022 to hide the click fraud, because usually it's done with a web view. So the user was finding that the malware was doing something because the web view was showing for a little of second, just 1 second, and close. So just in that moment, the click was performed. Now they are also avoiding that. So it's really, really difficult for an end user to understand that is going to be infected. Second case studies is what we call banker Trojan. This is one of the malwares that are really, really common nowadays. This is not targeting mostly it's targeting the end user, but it's also a problem for the enterprises and for the banks that essentially providing the application to their users. So we are going to see really briefly how the common attack of this malware works, how we are monitoring and what are our findings, and new families that came up in the last year, and the main features that these malicious applications are inserting. So this is one of the common attack chain for this particular malware. So after the application, the one in orange is going to be installed on the device, is acting like a legitimate application, and is starting to targeting the bank application or other application that we are going to see later. Essentially, when the application is going to be installed, he sends to this command and control server the list of all the applications installed on the device. Doing that, the attacker can decide which one he wants to target, which application he wants to target, and is going to send back the payloads with all the essentially the list of applications that he wants to attack and how to attack them. And one of the attack is really common is the overlay attack. So when the user wants to is going to open the bank application, the legitimate bank application, the malware is able to detect the opening and putting on the top of the screen a fake UI, where it's going to essentially ask for the username and password, and in that moment it's going to steal the credential of the users and everything back to the server, to the attacker. In Zimperium, every year we release a report that we call BunkerEast report, and this year, in this report, we are going to collect some all the information that we find in the year before. In the 2023, for example, we managed to monitor 29 families of this particular malware, the banking Trojan, and 19 of them are evolution of application that we found in the 2022, and 10 of them are instead new applications, so new family that has been found. The number that you see on the right, the 1100, are the number of bank applications that have been targeted this last year. So it's a great number. And the second one, the 700 application, are crypto wallets and all the other applications that are not traditional banking application. As you can see, a lot of countries has been impacted by this attack. So we have essentially we can say the whole world is targeted by this type of attack. These are the 10 families that has been monitored this year. There are a lot of numbers here, so I'm not going to through all of them. But what I would like to focus on two of them. Goodfather and PixBankBot. That's because they are doing the same thing, but to a different level. The first one, as you can see, has 1,000 of known variants. So it means that there is a big number of variants for that particular family, and is targeting more than 200 bank applications. Apart of that, the countries also targeted are a big number. In the second case, the PixBankBot, there are not a lot of known variants. They are not targeting a huge number of banks, just 4, and just one country is targeted. This is because the first malware, the first family, is offering the what we call malware as a service. And we are going to explain here. This is something that is growing up a lot. The attackers are not creating the malware by themselves and distributing by themselves, but they are using a third-party service that is providing the malware. And these guys are distributing this malware, this platform, let's call it, on a hacking forum, Telegram channel, whatever. You can buy an access to them. They are going to provide you the malware, and you just have to distribute the malware or decide how to starting the attack. For all the other things that are usually involved in the malware, a malware attack, you just have everything there. So they are providing for you the CNC. They are providing you different models that you can insert or less in the attack. If you want a keylogging, if you want to just stealing SMS, if you want to whatever you want. And you have control of all the data that the malware is able to exfiltrate it. Another common attack that is trending a lot during the last year is the automated transfer system abuse. Usually here there are different scenarios probably that can be used for this example, but this one is the common one. So it's everything starting with credential harvesting. So they are collecting the credential to access to the bank account. They are checking if the balance of the user is good to starting the attack. So if you don't have a lot of money, they don't care. And after that, they are going to start a transaction and luring the user to, in some way, to provide them the MFA token. After that, the attack is done, so they steal the money, how they usually want to do. Another way to perform this type of attack is completely hidden to the user. So when the user is starting by himself a transaction with this device, the malware is able to detect that the user is starting the transaction, and before the transaction the user is sending is clicking on the send button, they are changing the destination of the bank wire transfer, and at that point they steal the money without that the user is able to detect it. Another trend that we are monitoring in the last year is the telephone-based attack delivery. Essentially, everything starts usually from a phishing stage where the attacker is saying that you have a problem with your bank account. So call this number because you have to fix it. After that, the victim is going to call the number, and the attacker is starting to force the user to install the malware, essentially. And after that, everything is done because the attacker can do whatever he wants. All the attacks that I showed you before can happen here, or also other stuff can be done. Like for example, the next that is the screen share abusing. That is something that is really growing up in the last year. So the attacker is able to see everything on your device. What does it mean? Well, it means that every time that you open your bank account, they are able to see what you see, and they are able to click on whatever they can click. And this can be also done secretly, so hidden from the user, without that the user is able to understand and identify the presence of the malicious sample. And I think that's it from my side. I give the word to Nico again.
So just to add to what Gianluca said, he mentioned before that this is a corporate threat, not a consumer threat. Yeah. There are some countries, especially in Asia, in which authorities are making liable banks for the fraud committed. So that's why banks when develop their application, they need to be able to detect that there is another malicious application installed on the device. Yeah, right. So what's next? We'll focus on just these 4 items: multi-platform development frameworks, social engineering sophistication, AI-powered malware, of course, and the need of continuous adaptation. So the first 3 is like what's the bad, and then what we need to do. So multi-platform development frameworks. So what this trend that we are seeing more and more in application developments in general, not only for malware, is the use of things like Flutter. So Flutter is very convenient if you are a developer. You just develop your code only once, and then you compile that for different OSs. So you don't need now to develop your Android app and your iOS application. But at the same time, this makes the analysis of the app really complex. So far, there are very few companies that are able to, or solutions, sorry, that are able to analyze this kind of applications. So basically, you have a binary blob that is also changing every week. There are Flutter versions almost released every week, and the binaries are completely different. So from an analysis point of view, it's really messy. And we're just mentioning Flutter here as an example because we are detecting Flutter malware ourselves. But at the same time, there are other development frameworks that we don't know about yet, or that will be produced, that are going to make this more difficult. So in the end, we want to make easier the developer's life, but from a security point of view, that is quite complex. So social engineering sophistication, Gianluca mentioned 2 types of attacks that currently bankers are using, so TOAD and screen sharing. So how can this be used as a more sophisticated way? Now we have all these chatbots that can be talking to many people. So all these, both these attacks require some human in the loop. But what we can do is we can target a much wider audience by using chatbots. And whenever we see that some victim is actually getting into the attack, then what we can do is, okay, then we involve the human. So in the end, we can be targeting a way larger amount of victims. AI-powered malware, this is actually, what I'm showing here is from a company that's called Group IB, and this is the first malware that is using a quite sophisticated attack using AI. So what they are doing is they are installing a Trojan on a device, and they steal all the biometrics of the victim. So they steal pictures, they steal Face ID, they steal whatever they want. And then when they do on the side, they create a deep fake video of that user that is used to validate transactions. So there are some banks, for example, that allow you to validate a transaction with biometrics, so you don't need to use an OTP or to insert your password again. So what this malware is doing, they are creating a deep fake video of the user to validate the transaction. This is the first time we're seeing it. It's quite new. It has like a month or so. And this is targeting both Android and iOS. Everyone thinks that iOS is quite safe. That's not really the case. And we can expect this type of attacks to increase in complexity and well, by the use of AI. So what do we do on that? First, well, this is the first item. Shouldn't be a surprise for anyone. Heuristics shouldn't be an approach to follow anymore for a very long time. We need to constantly be incorporating all these new type of attacks that we are seeing, all the new techniques, everything that is happening, all these new behaviors that applications are using. And we need to do that in a privacy-centric approach. Now we have a lot of regulations. For example, if you are, let's use the case of the banker. If you are developing an application and you want to know other applications that are installed on the device, you need to assess if they are malicious on the app. You don't, on the device, sorry. You don't need to basically take all the applications that the user have installed on the device to check on the cloud if they are malicious. So basically we need an on-device solution that is based on machine learning or deep learning, and that is very privacy-centric. So what is here for you? So we focus on 2 different cases, kind of like a consumer case and a corporate case. And we're going to focus on what should you do in your organization if you are allowing devices, if you administer devices to your employees, and what should you do if you are developing apps. So let's start by your organization. Next month, basically, you need to assess the risk you are exposed to. Again, we said before that security awareness is not there yet. We need to move forward from the 90s of the mobile devices. So you need to have visibility. You need to know what the risk you're exposed to, and assess the visibility you have. Are you using mobile threat detection? Are you using VPNs? Are you using MDMs? So that's something that you should know as soon as possible. And then in a year from now, what you should do is to start implementing all these security solutions that already exist today. If you are developing applications, well, next week, again, it's all about visibility. What do you know about the app? What do you know about the environment in which your application is running? What type of attacks exist that can target your type of application? And in a year, now there are many solutions that are integrating, and just an SDK gives you exactly this, right? So you can know if a device in which you're running is rooted, if someone is tampering with your app, if there are malware installed on the same device. And last, integrate some sort of code protection mechanisms. We still see a lot of mobile applications that don't have any sort of code protection. And we all know if you want to target something, the first thing you will do is to try to reverse engineer it. So basically, you need to integrate some sort of code protection if you are developing apps. So thank you, and we have a couple of minutes for questions if you want.
question for you.
Yeah, sure.
Most of the MDMs seem to check for device posture, right? How does that relate to some of the detection capabilities today? Without getting into vendor names maybe, but just curious because the premise is that that's some sort of a defense from non-corporate managed handheld, and therefore at least that component of the corporate data is safe. Just your thoughts.
So just to rephrase your question, you're saying how device posture, like at the station?
Many of these mobile device management, they kind of create an enclave for the corporate apps. The assumption is that when the MDM is installed, at least that corporate set of the apps is kind of quote unquote safe.
Yeah.
Your thoughts on how does that ecosystem really work?
Yeah, so MDM should be complementary to MTD. So MDM is just it's management. So you can push stuff, you can get some information on the device, you can get some basic attestation. So you know if the OS version is updated, if you can correlate that with OS versions that are actively exploited and these kind of things. But you don't have visibility on other things. At most you get if the device is rooted, and only some MDMs are getting that. But that's not enough. You don't know if there's malware in the device, if the user is sideloading applications or other things. So it's important to complement MDM with something like MTD.
In terms of the actual threat actors being successful on, in attacking a mobile device, is there any way that they can get the malware into the device without the user either clicking on a link or the user actually, taking some action that, inserts the malware?
Yeah, they are a zero-click attack.
Yeah, so those are quite expensive, let's say. But for example, on iOS, all these spywares, like Pegasus, for example, is a zero-click attack. Sometimes, they've been evolving how do you do it. But the latest version, you just receive an iMessage and that has some sort of payload inside, and without any user interaction, they were actually compromising that device. So that's for example, on the iOS side. On Android, I think zero-click attacks are less common, or at least they didn't make them to the news.
Yeah, but
much.
not exactly. Nothing maybe came up in the last few period of time, but they are possible. Imagine that a library like I don't know, a library that is opening an image. I just send you a link or whatever. Or I put the image on the web, so the user is opening that page with his phone and is compromised.
But the user still needs to click on
yes.
something.
Yes,
okay.
But sometimes there is I don't remember exactly stage fright.
Yeah, actually also
needs user interaction.
No,
but
it doesn't. So this is quite old, but there was this huge vulnerability called stage fright. And it was very similar. The victim was receiving a multimedia message, and there was a bug on the parser of the multimedia file, and that was an immediate compromise without the user even opening the message. Just receiving the message and going through the parser was enough. So we haven't seen any of those like in the news lately, but
right.
They are possible for sure.
They are possible.
So the next question is Zimperium or Zimperium-powered mobile threat defense. What does it do to stop those types of attacks from being effective?
So we have two things here: detection or prevention, right? So MTD is about visibility sometimes. So Zimperium is acting. First of all, if there is a malicious application, we will assess the maliciousness of the app on the device, so we can assess that. But that doesn't prevent installation. Installation is already there. And in some other cases, I wish I had another slide that. So for example, for these zero-click attacks, in most cases we won't prevent them, but we will detect the system compromise. So we will see whatever the attacker is using to achieve persistence. So it's very, very difficult to achieve persistence on a device without doing some stuff like disabling Linux or remounting the file system as a read-write to add some stuff that shouldn't be there. So we are detecting that. We are detecting all the changes in the system that are telling that an attack happened. And in some cases, because of the protection layers that we have, we can prevent an attack. But I don't have actually material to show you that, but we can discuss that later if you want.
Thank you.
No problem.
Yep. So these are legitimate apps that are basically skinned, so they get through the approval process and then use like code obfuscation through Flutter to. It's not quite polymorphism, but they're able to then change the behavior of the app. And somebody installs something free, perhaps, and then it inventories everything.
Yeah.
So is there any signature-based stuff that can catch that type of thing? I mean, it's basically signatures are out the door with Zeus and SpyEye with polymorphism, but I mean. I'm just kind of wondering, like, where is this? I mean, are we at 2006? Are we at 2007, 10?
Yeah. So Flutter, the way Flutter works is you basically have the app is just kind of like a you see two native libraries, right? So I have one with the Flutter framework, and then the application code. So we have a virtual machine to execute code. That code is a binary blob that has to be serialized in a specific way, and it's changing almost every week. Not every week, but I would say like every 2-3 weeks. So creating something based on heuristics in there, it's almost impossible. Yeah. So you need to try to do different things. So what we do there, our Flutter solution are more relying on the backend, and we do dynamic analysis. We can instrument all the Flutter framework in order to get a lot of information. So that's how we are addressing Flutter. So we do that, and then what we do is we push stuff to the device in order to detect what we, like the fingerprints or the signatures that we saw on the backend, right?
So the Android App Store and the App Store on iOS or Apple App Store, they're pretty much countermeasures, or just not able to detect this at all.
So they are, Google works like different corporations inside of one. So they, even then, we are actually we contribute to what they call the App Defense Alliance. So we see all the apps that Google is going to release. So before they release that, they send that for us to get our risk posture of if we think it's malware or not. And talking to them, they are also facing the same challenges. So Flutter is also a challenge for them. You also made a question before about legitimate applications not related to Flutter, but you said how they get to the device. So one thing that we also see is droppers. So maybe you just have an application that doesn't have any malicious there, but has the capability of getting a payload from the cloud and then executing the payload. And that can go around all the store protection or the store detection, because when they send the application to be released, there is nothing malicious there. But then they activate the payload maybe like, 2-3 months later.
Yeah, okay, the evolution. Cool, thanks.
Welcome.
Hi, do you have any statistics of successful attacks from targeting mobile by geography? How successful are they in America or EMEA or in Asia?
We do. I don't have anything to show you here, but so actually we release every year what we call the Global Threat Report, in which we have all these kind of insights. I would say that at the moment, related to Android malware, APAC is the region in which you have the biggest amount of malware. That's also because it's very prevalent the use of third-party stores, or they are not using only the Google Play store, but they have like, Huawei store, Samsung store, and their app betting is sometimes not as thorough as Google. So if you want to get just what's the most impacted region, I would say APAC, followed by South America.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.